flesh, sweat in the flesh. Hey, how was you feeling, bro? Feeling like the four, I feel fantastic. Which one would you be, though? Mr. Fantastic, cause I'm money like an asset. Burberry trench, my coat, you smoke a record, now I'm smoking on Nick Cat. I'm a Bieber, you know, when I wear my dick out, she said too big, got that man. How was you feeling, bro? Feeling like the four, I feel fantastic. Which one would you be, though? Mr. Fantastic, cause I'm money like an asset.
And they have a fucking shitting heavy. Cool. Love it. Fuck all you fucking retards.
Team Fortress 2 was released over 15 years ago. For reference, so was Sam & Max episode 104, Abe Lincoln Must Die, but I'm not so sure it left a big impression.
Fuck this shit!
It has been more than enough time for TF2 to fall out of the spotlight, and while it has to some extent, it still gets a decent amount of players. But why? TF2 was basically the first class-based shooter to feature distinct personalities between roles. It's something we're used to now, like so many newer games feature a cast of playable characters, and to be honest, they all kind of follow the same patterns. You got the explosive one, the edgy one, the building one, and you get the picture.
Oh, shut up.
But TF2 did all of this first, a drastic change of pace from Team Fortress Classic, whose character designs were ugly as all hell. It was also a change from the original plan for TF2, which was a more realistic approach to the visuals and gameplay. For example, there was a class plan called the Commander, who would have a bird's eye view of the match and could order players around. But Valve scrapped it once they realized nobody wanted to be screamed at by 13-year-old telling them to push into enemy lines and die instantly. They instead went with a cartoonish retro style, which I do think is part of the reason the game stayed so popular. A realistic war shooter's graphics would have shortened the game's lifespan, while the style Valve opted for allows TF2 to seem relatively modern. Take the example of Jet Set Radio, as well as having an absolutely banging soundtrack. The game is cel-shaded and stylized, and it still looks good 23 years later. Cartoony graphics just aren't as indicative of a game's aging release date as attempted realism is. Jet Set Radio wasn't held back by the limits of photorealism in the year 2000, while other games like Counter-Strike were.
Finally, some good fucking food.
Okay, Sean.
Fucking shit!
It's hard to know how much the visuals and gameplay of TF2 influenced other games, but it became such a massive hit that one thing became clear. Competition was inevitable. The main contender was, of course, Overwatch. To the general public, Overwatch instantly seemed more accessible than TF2. It was newer, more colorful, and with a more diverse group of characters to choose from. And when Overwatch first dropped, everyone sucked for a while, which made it a lot easier for casual players to have fun in a match instead of having to deal with fucking Twitch TV's Scoutmaster69, who had been mastering TF2's mechanics for 9 years straight. Not everyone was a fan though. A lot of TF2 players were frustrated with content creators switching to Overwatch, which clearly took a lot of inspiration from its predecessor. The two communities became divided. On one side lay the one with all the hype, and on the other, a game that people grew up playing. It was clear who the underdog was, and that's what people do. They root for the underdog. The TF2 players that remained became outspoken advocates for their game, and as Valve continued to ignore TF2 and bots continued to leak into public matches, a bond was created between the players. A bond forged in the idea that they were the few keeping TF2 alive. And to be honest, it's not far from the truth. I have no doubt that #SaveTF2 was the thing that brought Valve's attention back to the game. Adversity faced the community for most of the game's life, and instead of losing the player base, it made them stronger. And that's how TF2 has stayed relevant all these years later. Or maybe it's just still fun to play, but
I guess we'll never know.